It's time to get nerdy, y'all.
A little bit of gaming history for you.
Something relevant in gaming and discuss our opinions on it.
Should we kick it out of here, or should we kick-start it?
This is the part where you, the listeners, try to stump the hosts.
I'm not a lawyer. I just play one on a podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's Tuesday, February 6th, 2024. And you know what that means. It's time to get nerdy, y'all. Welcome to episode number 296 of Two Nerds in a Pod, the nerdiest video game podcast in the galaxy. I am Lom, also known as Mr. Nice Guy, and I'm joined by my comrade in gaming commentary, the Miggity Mac, also known as Maction. Mac, I was not here last week, so it's been a couple weeks since we caught up. How are things, dude?
It has been a couple weeks. Things are good. Last week, it was a non-streamed episode, but we did record one, and that went up onto the podcast feed, of course. That was with Brittany, who does the Swords and Starships podcast. She was kind enough to join me. We recorded it pretty much at the usual time, and, fantastic conversation. She was great. Good episode to go listen to.
Yeah.
But also, man, the past 2 weeks have been kind of fun, exciting, and, everything in between. So, I hit a deer.
What?
Well, okay. My spouse hit a deer driving the car, but I was there, too. And it was just, it, hopped out, looked at us, bonked its face into our, it was waiting, and then it was just okay, let's time it. Okay, now!
Right.
And then, face planted into the front fender, and then bounced off, and so, it didn't really do that much damage, but is more of a, more of a inconvenience than anything else, because car's still doing just fine.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Did the deer survive?
I mean, it was not on the side of the road when we pulled over, so I assume assume it just rung its bell. At least I hope so.
There you go.
What else? Just lots of craziness. I got myself a new game, one that I've been wanting for a while.
Ooh, what game?
The Metroid Prime trilogy for the Wii.
Nice. Classic.
Yeah. So, obviously, Metroid Prime 3 got made for the Wii, and then they went back and redid Prime 1 and 2 with the same Wii controls, and I've kind of wanted it all, but in that time period of, 2000 and post, when people were asking, ridiculous prices for video games, I don't think I saw this for anything less than, $200-$300. And
really?
so,
wow.
Yeah, so this one I picked up for, 60. And I was like, you know what? For that price, I will splurge. And it was my present to me. So
Love it.
I'll get a chance to play it. But anyway, that's just, some of the excitement from me. Nice Guy, how was your birthday stuffs?
Dude, it was good. Now, for those who may not know, my wife and I are born a week apart. And so, literally 7 days, same year and everything. So, every year it's kind of like a dual celebration. This year we decided to take a week-long cruise to Mexico. And we hit 3 different ports. We went to Mazatlan, we went to Puerto Vallarta, and we went to Cabo. And in 2 of those ports, we did awesome things. We saw some whales. We went whale watching on one of them. And the other one, we did some ATVs. So that was super fun. Third port, we simply went to the beach, relaxed, ate some good food, drank some good smoothies and stuff, and ate a good lunch and just sat on the beach and read. I've been trying to finish up the third Ernest Cline book, and now the name leaves me for a long time, Armada, for a while. And so I got a few chapters of that in, and that was good, and got some sun, and it was fun, man. Cruises are great if you can handle the ship. So much to do on the cruise. Comedians on the cruise, I gotta say, shout out to the comedians, because they were funny. I had a really good time watching their shows, and so that was good. And speaking of which, I have a show this weekend up in Stevens Bay.
Ooh.
And I forget the name of the place. I probably should say it so people can go, but it's a bar and grill up there. And it should be a really, really good show. When I first started doing stand-up, Mac, I thought, why would anyone ever want to do a show at a restaurant? But restaurants with an actual stand-up venue have some of the best shows that are non-comedy club ever. So, so it should be fun. I'm excited to go up there, Retro Game Shop, and do the show. Now, speaking of the game that you just purchased, we were talking before the show about Midwest Gaming Classic, which is coming up pretty soon. Do you think you'd be open to a little bit of retro game shopping, little retro game browsing while you're here in the MKE?
Nothing would make me more thrilled than to go retro game shopping with you, Lom.
I think it'd be fun.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily buy a lot every time, but it's fun to see what they got out there. So we'll have to add that to the list. And on that note, Mac, I say we do what we do best and hop right up in that gaming news, my friend. What do you think about that?
Absolutely, Lom. I have been, as always, out of the loop. What is new in video gaming?
So much. And once again, this is episode 296 of Two Nerds in a Pod, 4 episodes away from 300. We got to do something awesome for episode 300, Mac. Hopefully I didn't blow out eardrums with my excitement. But here is the first news story of the week, and this is one that's a couple weeks old that Mac and I have been waiting to talk about. This is on Medium.com. MIG Switch, a legal quandary or a game-changing innovation. This is written by Paul Farrelly.
Okay, before you go past the headline, I just have to say, why not both? Okay, sorry, carry on.
Yeah, that's fair. And for those who want to dive deeper into this topic, there's a YouTuber named Tacky Udon who put out a very, very detailed, extensive video about how this product works and about some of the pros and some of the cons, and we are going to discuss them today. I know Mac is going to have a lot to say. Here's what the author, Paul Farrelly, wrote. When it comes to backup and development tools for Nintendo Switch consoles, the MIG Switch Flash card is a game changer. It works with all firmwares, versions, and types of consoles, including regular and light versions. With its simple plug-and-play design, the MIG Switch doesn't need any installation or adjustments to the Nintendo Switch system, which is what makes it stand out. The MIG Switch Dumper and the MIG Switch card are the two main parts of the MIG Switch Flash card. To function, you'll need a microSD card, which isn't supplied, but is fundamental to the MIG Switch card. You can easily back up your legally owned Nintendo Switch games with the MIG Switch Dumper. Now, here's what goes on. It says, having said that, the MIG Switch is not immune to controversy. Some have voiced concerns about possible copyright infringement and the possibility of violating Nintendo's terms of service. Nintendo has taken encryption precautions to monitor and identify illegal game copying, which could have dire repercussions for consumers like console bans and the inaccessibility of physical games. Now, Mac, for the uninitiated at home who maybe didn't watch that Tacky Udon video, each of these Nintendo Switch carts have an identifier that makes them their own individual game. And so if you were to back up one of those games, make a copy of it, and then let's say you trade in your actual physical copy of the game to a GameStop or to a pawn shop or to someone like that, or you sell it on Facebook Marketplace, and then both of you log in to Nintendo Switch Online with that same unique code or same unique identifier, it could result in console bans. I hope everyone's following the logic here. And so that's where it gets a little bit controversial. The article goes on to say, the MIG Switch is a revolutionary product that offers users a plug-and-play device with an SD card slot for Switch ROMs, even though it may have legal ramifications. Users should be mindful of the risks, such as possible console bans, but the MIG Switch opens doors, makes backups easy, and improves gaming. Now, for context, Mac, and then I'm just going to open it up to get your thoughts broadly, this will cost about $60. So, effectively, we all know what flash cards are. You know, obviously, you got to buy your own SD card. But you can make legal backups, put them on your MIG Switch. If you lose the MIG Switch, you're losing $60. One argument people make is that, hey, I don't want to travel with 10 Switch games. I don't want to lose them. They're tiny. And so I'm going to carry this $60 MIG Switch instead. And there's other arguments as well. Mac, what are your thoughts broadly?
Okay, broadly, because Nintendo is gonna Nintendo, they are very probably going to say something that is false about video games, copyright, and things like that. One of the things expressly put out there about from the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, which certainly needs to be, fine-tuned to catch up with our technological world, is that you, for buying something, are entitled to a digital backup of anything that you buy. Books, music, television shows, whatever, nobody's required to provide it to you, but you are entitled to something that you buy. Now, Mr. Nice Guy, when you bought a television series on your PlayStation 5 and then that disappeared, you didn't buy a copy of it, you bought a license to it, so obviously when that happened, you don't get to maintain your backup copy. And that, unfortunate, but that's kind of the world that we live in. However,
Sure.
don't let Nintendo tell you that you can't have ROM copies of your Nintendo games. That is a more or less a right guaranteed to you, thanks to the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. So, but your backup, should you sell your game, is supposed to be taken off. That was true before the games had unique identifiers, like what you're talking about with the Switch games.
Right.
And it will continue to be the case. So just throwing that out there, because anytime there's something like this come up, you're going to have the PR people at Nintendo say something that's wrong, and, try and shake the saber at you.
Sure.
But, so broadly, I will say that I love the idea for those people who say have a lot of, Switch games, being able to, I don't know, maybe take their Switch game with them in one compact thing. If you've got an SD card that's going to hold, they've got, 1 terabyte, 2 terabyte SD cards these days?
Sure.
However much it takes for each of those Nintendo ROM files, maybe you just go to that Mexican cruise down to Puerto Vallarta with every single Switch game in your library. Why choose?
Right.
You're not gonna have to. So definitely cool from that perspective. Another thing that would be very delightful about it, and that these ROM cartridges are really great about, is when you need to, let's say you, Mr. Nice Guy, you're making a video game.
Sure.
If you need to test on the hardware, that opens up a way for you to test on the hardware without having to get additional special things.
That's a really good point.
And there are many indie game devs that it would be very useful for them to be able to very quickly test an adjustment, a change on the hardware with an easy $60 thing instead of a much more expensive development kit before having to maybe push something bigger. So that's definitely one case that I think is well worth putting out there.
So I will push back a little bit on that, because I do
Sure.
agree, obviously, with the DMCA, right? That people have a right to have digital backups, but I don't know if developers have a right to be able to access the hardware by going around things in that way. I don't know if they're entitled to that right. I legitimately don't know. I don't know the legality of it. If there's some law that says you have to use a development kit if you're going to develop on our hardware, or if it's just, hey, free reign, go ahead and use X, Y, or Z method of getting your update tested so that you don't have to wait as long. And I do think it's a convenient thing. I'm just curious about the legality. I don't know.
It is unlikely that it is, strictly speaking, permitted. And it might entirely be the case that Nintendo or any of the companies has a sort of hey, you're not going to do, circumvent our whatevers.
Exactly.
There is I believe there is currently in the DMCA a exemption for circumvention of certain things, but that mostly applies to past systems or systems that are no longer in place, bypassing those security measures rather than stuff that's still actively being used.
Sure.
So
Okay.
yeah, I think that's a great thing to point out, that a dev probably wouldn't have the right to use this to circumvent that, but it would make it very useful and easier for them. So yeah, but at the end of the day, maybe Nintendo's just gonna Nintendo. Or Sony's gonna Sony, Xbox is gonna Xbox.
Dude, I think this is an awesome piece of tech. I think for $60, it's a no-brainer. I have not really ever been someone to buy flash carts But Mac, if you were ever the type of person to do that, I don't know if you have, what would they generally cost? Like for buying one for Game Boy, are they more than $60? I assume.
Well, I'm so glad that you asked, Mr. Nice Guy. It depends on exactly which ones. Some of the flash cartridges need a little bit more extra bells and whistles to be compatible with all the games.
For sure.
But you're looking at anywhere between $80 for for a thing. I think the Game Boy ones run for as low as like 60, all the way up to something like 250 for those flash cartridges that have. Well, now hang on. For those ones, they tend to have lots of bells and whistles, including but not limited to save states that it runs on the hardware side. So that in the cartridge, it basically saves that moment in time on the video game, and you can reload a save state there. So very useful for practice. I see those more expensive options very often being used by the speedrunners, so that they can save a state and practice a very difficult section of a game without having to fiddle with too many things. But yeah, no, very, very cool. So $60.
Yeah, and that's my thing is, dude, for $60, like, to me, this is a no-brainer. The one thing I'm super curious about is with the Nintendo Switch 2 being rumored to come out later this year, potentially Q3, maybe holiday season, is Nintendo going to use the same type of cartridges in the Switch 2 that they used on the Nintendo Switch? And I'm not suggesting that the Nintendo Switch becomes obsolete. I just think it would suck if they change up the software again and use a different type of cart, especially with the MIG Switch coming out. Now, knowing Nintendo, if it's not too late along in the process, they are absolutely going to use a different type of cartridge.
Or at the very least, they're going to use something that will specifically try and prevent this particular type of circumvention, if you will.
And, I really think that, this is a whole podcast of its own. I know I messaged you about this in advance, which I don't typically do, but this is such a deep dive that I wanted us to both think about it. One of my biggest concerns is, does Nintendo go physical for longer, simply as a way of trying to combat this type of behavior? Because it sucks if I go to GameStop, right? And I buy a game for my kid, or maybe I'm a kid and I buy a game. I've saved up my allowance, and then my Nintendo Switch account gets banned simply because someone else had sold that used game to GameStop, to a pawn shop, wherever, and we've both logged in online, and that unique identifier looks like it's been mirrored, or two people have used it.
Yeah.
I just think that's extremely unfortunate. So it'll be interesting to see what stance Nintendo takes on a physical versus digital software model going forward.
Yeah.
Now, like I said, this is a whole podcast of its own. I do want to point out really quickly before we talk about one more news story, MIGSwitch.com. Here's what it says before you can even go into their webpage. MIGSwitch is a third-party backup and development device for the Nintendo Switch, not endorsed nor licensed by Nintendo of Japan. Before ordering or using MIGSwitch, you must carefully document yourself about the legality of creating backups of your own game cartridges in your country/jurisdiction. And then it goes on to say this is not permitted in every region, et cetera, and you have to agree to that statement before you can enter the webpage. So they're really covering their bases, or at least attempting to. I'm excited to see what happens in this sphere.
Yeah.
Mac, one other topic I want to hit, and we can just do it in like a couple minutes because I know we're close to time for news of the week. But this is on GameSpot.com. Indiana Jones and other Xbox first-party games could be coming to PlayStation 5. Here's what it says by Darren Bontheus. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Xbox and PC platform exclusivity for games from Microsoft first-party studios could be coming to an end, as a new report indicates that the company is looking to take a multi-platform approach moving forward. According to a report from The Verge, Microsoft is weighing up which titles will remain exclusive and others that will appear on Switch or PS5 in the future. Separately, Gears of War was said to be on the list of franchises being considered for a PlayStation release. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle reportedly is being considered for PlayStation 5 launch, blah, 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 blah. We could go on about this over and over and over again. I will just say off the top, I think it is a hard time to be an Xbox fan. Not because I'm at the point in my life where I believe in console wars, or where I believe that you can't just like a console because you like it, or you like the controller, or you like the interface, or you like the features, or you like, whatever. It's a nostalgia thing. But more because Xbox has made it clear that there is really no reason to own an Xbox for the software. And that's traditionally why people have bought games, is that software sells hardware, in my opinion. I think that Xbox is struggling enough that they feel they need to sell their exclusive games on other consoles from the get-go. We've never seen this before with Mario, with Halo, with Uncharted, with any console exclusive, saying, hey, you know what, we're going to sell it everywhere else from day one. I think that they're in trouble, and I think that they're scrambling for ideas. Mac, I don't know if you have other thoughts on this, but as someone who has really followed this closely and who owns all the consoles, this is unprecedented, and I can see why Xbox gamers are feeling like they've been shafted.
It's tough because we both believe video games are art, and we want that to be experienced by as many people as possible. And so it's hard to not feel like this is a little bit of a win, but it's sobering to think that it might be a portent of doom.
Agree, and that has been the news of the week.
All right, well, now that we've looked at what's going on around us right now, let's take a little look into the past with some video game history. So, a couple of things for you, Mr. Nice Guy. I'll start with the big one first. The year, 1982. The home console scene has Atari, it has ColecoVision, and still has some hanger-ons from the first gen of home consoles from the late 70s. But the arcade is still very much champion of the day. We're still 1 year away from E.T. and the precipitous video game crash of the 1980s. And Pac-Man is still very much top dog at the arcades. It came out in 1980, of course, Pac-Man did. And the big arcade game of 1981 winds up being Donkey Kong. And that still doesn't get nearly half of the, of the sales that Pac-Man's getting. As a matter of fact, Pac-Man is still very, very much close to top dog, still to this day, for video game sales.
Yeah, fantastic game.
Oh yeah, very fantastic. But there are people who still want a little bit more from Pac-Man. Now, like I said, the year's 1982. I mean, what do we do, Mr. Nice Guy? It's not like we have DLC. We can't get a new expansion for a video game. But what if we could? Okay? Wild, crazy, but it is possible. It would require cunning. It would require insane expertise. And it would require hardware modifications, the likes of which the world has never seen. What we get is we get a little company called General Computer Corporation, a company that basically makes arcade mods. And what that entails is a fresh board or perhaps new components to solder onto a board that are going to fundamentally alter the way that the game plays. Now, they do this at first a little bit sooner with a modification for Missile Command that turns it into Super Missile Attack. Now,
awesome.
Those arcade aficionados out there probably know that that was an Atari game, and Atari got hopping mad, and they sued them. But at some point in time, during the suit there, they decided it was better to make friends than an enemy here. And so what they did was they said to General Computer Corporation, they said, hey, tell you what, we'll make this lawsuit go away, but we're going to have a settlement. You know how Mac feels about settlements. But part of the settlement is going to be that you agree that for any of these mods, you're going to approach the people who made the original one, and you're going to give them a chance to buy it from you.
Interesting.
And so General Computer Corporation agreed to that. On the heels of that, they had made a modification for Pac-Man. And so, they're people of their word, they walked it into Midway, They gave Midway a go at it, and they brought them on officially as, as contractors, basically, to produce what would originally be called Super Pac-Man, but we would all know as Ms. Pac-Man. And that is how we got Miss Pac-Man in 1982. Started out as a hardware mod from people who, essentially they were selling these upgrade kits. Like, you'd have the arcade, it'd be doing the thing, and then you pay an extra like $400 or whatever one-time payment to these guys to come in, install that new piece onto the board, and then bam, you've got basically a brand new game.
That's kind of cool.
Oh yeah. Really, really cool. And not entirely dissimilar to some of the things that we see modern day where there are some paid mods in a few games. That is just one of the cool things this week. Many more cool things went on this week in years before. And I think I just want to real quick highlight two others.
Please do.
One, a lesser known, but a title that I love, that came out in 2004 for the original Xbox, called Breakdown. An attempt to do a sort of first-person shooter and fighter combat, so hand-to-hand, a very time travel, sci-fi sort of theme to it. It's not the best writing in the world, but good voice acting, and for the time, just a real fun thing. I still have a copy, and I do crack it out occasionally, or would if my original Xbox had not,
Wow.
But one of these days, I'll get it back. And then the other one, 1992 for the NES, so a late release in the lifespan of that, a game called Mr. Gimmick. Very fun. If you haven't played it before, it's one of those underground games, especially because I think it would take a lot longer before we got the US release.
Sure.
But Mr. Gimmick, you are a children's toy. And you essentially have this projectile that's a star that you kind of bounce around, and you can ride on it. And it's got some real cool video game physics going on that allow you to do a lot of real cool momentum-based tricks and jumps and the like. So it's a real fun one. It takes a bit to get used to, but very enjoyable.
Nice.
Yeah. So, well, that's what I had for video game history this week. Short ones, but good ones.
Well, now we're going to get a little bit more modern. And before we dive into our next segment, I want to give a shout out to all the awesome indie games that are on Steam Next Fest this week. Whether you own just a PC or if you have a Steam Deck and you have the ability to download some of these great indies that have their demos up for the next few days, please take some time to check out Steam Next Fest. And hey, if you see something that Mac and I should highlight, let us know. We'd be happy to reach out to the devs. Now, on that note, Mac, it's time for our indie game of the week, where we talk about something that may need more attention and to tell you if it needs your attention. And Mac, this week we have a game that I am excited to discuss. It's called Anomaly Agent. Here's the description. Anomaly Agent is a cyberpunk action-adventure featuring fluid combat, a time-bending story, quirky characters, and a catchy synthwave soundtrack. Punch or shoot through mobs of enemies, impact the story with your choices, and stop the anomalies before the world plunges into chaos. Mac, Anomaly Agent was just released in January 24th of this year, 2024. The developer is Pew Pew Games, and the publisher is also Pew Pew Games. Currently, it's sitting on Steam at overwhelmingly positive with 5,057 reviews. Now, just to give some context real quick on this game, it's also on the Nintendo Switch. This is made by two brothers. They did the bulk of the building of this game over about 3 years. And I'm going to leave it at that for now. Mac, game is $11.99. What are your thoughts on this game? People need to know.
Okay. So, it has a little bit of beat 'em up to it. So it has a slight arcadey feel. I've never been especially good at beat 'em ups, although I suppose it's fair to say that a key component of beat 'em ups is that sort of third dimension of
Sure.
going, back and forward.
Yep.
Which this does not have. It just has, at least in the levels that I experienced. So it's pop.
It does not.
Okay, so you've beaten it.
I have, yes.
Okay. I haven't gotten all the way there yet. So
That's okay.
it never has that, but it does
Nope.
have, just the sort of XY, so you can jump and things like that. Fluid combat, generally true. I'd say maybe that's a little bit of some PR. For the most part, the combat does have some things certainly going for it. Overall, though, I found myself somewhat frustrated by the combat as I was playing, and maybe this is just a Maction get good type situation. But there was a thing that these enemies would do, right? And they introduce it to you really quickly on, that if you get two enemies that get next to each other, they'll kind of fuse and level up.
Yes.
And sometimes that means that they get significantly more aggressive and significantly better move sets. And
you hated it.
I wasn't,
Hated that.
I wasn't the biggest fan. I felt like I felt like that kept getting in my way a lot. Like I
Sure.
was never really. You also have two options, at least in the early segments. You have two options for ranged stuff, and that is a very limited ranged attack that doesn't do too much damage, and then you're out of ammo and need to get more. Or a parrying mechanic to parry ranged things back at. So I found that if you tried to be conservative in your playstyle and hang back and try and kite enemies, that inevitably you would just wind up with a bunch of supercharged, because they would like pile up on the edge of the screen and instantly become big. But consequently, I just wasn't so good at it, so I regularly found myself in these situations where I was, just, I don't know, not doing damage fast enough to prevent myself from getting hosed by a whole bunch of superpowers, or, because, if you have one guy, one supercharged melee combatant, and no ranged people shooting at you, then maybe you can handle that. But once you start getting those mixes, gets real bad for Mac real fast. So, but maybe I'm just not thinking fourth dimensionally. Who knows? There's a time component. So, anyway, this one certainly I'm an on the fencer about this. But Mr. Nice Guy, you've beaten it. You've gone the distance. What did you think? The people want to know.
I really, really liked this game.
Mm-hmm.
When I first started, I thought, oh man, this is going to be super elementary. It's going to have no dimensions. It's going to be just run through and punch people and kite them. But the story in this game, brilliant. It's very, very Katana Zero-esque for those of you who have played Katana Zero. The influence is very, very clear. You are doing a lot of punching, but there's a lot of diversity of fighting as you get more and more into the game and as you start to level things up. I also really like the mechanic they have where you can block bullets, or rather ricochet bullets. You can ricochet shots. It's basically parrying.
Yeah.
And it's great. Now, I think the sense of humor is probably the reason I couldn't put this game down. Because, to Mac's point, I don't think that the combat is anything super special. But the story, there's a point where there's a twist. And I really don't want to give it away. But there's a twist that makes the game very, very interesting and very, very humorous. And once I got to that point, this was while we were on the cruise, my wife and I had some downtime. And I just couldn't put it down. So I also want to say that the email exchange I had with the developers, shout out to Pew Pew Games for sending this, was very indicative of the sense of humor that they had when making this game. This is two brothers who obviously did this as a passion project, and I feel like they did a phenomenal job. I'm a fan of the pixel art. I'm a fan of the cyberpunk. I really thought the music and the synthwave soundtrack that they had in this game was great. And I really just don't want to spoil the story, but I feel like the story is what really brought it all together. And just some of the absurdity of the characters in the game and the different things you experience. One other thing that they did in this game that I thought was really, really well done is the choice system. And it's not a choice system like what you'd see in a Fallout or a like an Infamous, where you're deciding whether you want to be good or evil.
You can just be nice or a jerk.
That's exactly right. Yeah, you can just be nice in your dialogue choices, or you can be a jerk. And depending on which one you choose, you get points in one of those categories that you can level up different things. How long to beat? I have this mod on my Steam Deck that brings up the how long to beat stats for the games. And this one is at 4.6 hours for average. I beat it in 4.3. It did not overstay its welcome. And I think that the overwhelmingly positive rating on Steam with 5,000 reviews, like 2 weeks after it's been released, is indicative of how this game is being viewed, and I would agree. The only downside I'll say about this, I don't think there's tons of replayability, and I was kind of frustrated that one of the achievements looks like it's going to require me to do the whole game over, which I'm not going to do, but I had a blast with this game, and I think they should be very proud of what they've done here. Yeah, that's been our indie game of the week.
All right, well, now let's turn to a crowdfunding project that's trying to get off the ground. We call this Kick or Kickstart. I've sent Lom a link to a Kickstarter project that we're going to take a look at, discussing the virtues and the vices, and at the end we'll say whether or not we think it should be kicked out of here or kick-started. So this one is called Co-Ridden. So this is a co-op action RPG that very much channels the style of science fantasy in its themes that I feel like might be a good stand-in for a Horizon Zero Dawn prequel. Now, playstyle-wise, if you get a Diablo vibe, that is absolutely as intended. But their twist on this sort of formula is front and center with a shape-shifting mechanic, changing into creatures that you've defeated with an unlimited swapping between a whole bunch of different forms. While the shape-shifting is somewhat limited in the quantity of forms, I believe they say somewhere in there that they're doing 6. And then, of course, you've got, your beast forms that you can do, and also your human playstyles when you're in your human form, different classes, essentially, in that sort of fantasy science genre that they're going for, giving, hopefully, a bunch of options for people to tailor those playstyles. RPG-style level trees and skill trees going on there as well. Now, this has almost, well, at least it did almost make its Kickstarter goal. How's it looking right now? Is it pretty close?
It looks like it's at about 19,000 even out of 21,498.
Gotcha. So it's pretty darn close. It's probably going to make its release here. It has a Q3 release date, so that's of this year, so not that far out. A couple of things that, though, very much appeal to me about this is that it has a between 1 and 4 player co-op option.
Ooh.
And you know me, Mr. Nice Guy, I'm a much bigger fan of the co-op than the competitive. And,
sure.
Fingers crossed, I don't want to, I don't want to jinx it, but I might be getting some better internet soon at my house.
Ooh,
so,
okay.
So some stuff might be a bit of a possibility in the future. Anyway, if you are interested, if this speaks to you as you take a look at Co-Ridden, they are looking for $26 for a minimum buy-in for a digital copy of the game. So, Mr. Nice Guy, what you thinking? How does this grab you?
It's tough, man, because, right now is Steam Next Fest. And I actually think that I saw this one as part of Steam Next Fest, not knowing that you were going to talk about it today. And it does intrigue me. I just don't know if the price point is where it needs to be. Now, the reason that I think it might be is because if you're putting in 1 to 4 player co-op, there's a good chance that there's going to be some replayability. You're not just going to play through things once with a with a party, you're probably going to play through it over and over and over again, and maybe there's different paths, and maybe there's different things you can morph into, and maybe you can play this over and over. But I guess we've seen so many good games come out that were so much less than this. This hasn't really showed me anything based on this Kickstarter, based on the video, that leads me to believe it should be costing that much. So that's one of my major holdups.
Yeah, the price point is definitely a little bit on the high side. However, this is, we are talking co-op, which means it's going to be online co-op, which means some component of maybe servers of higher costs on the back end. I'm not exactly sure. I haven't programmed a video game before. I just give my perspectives, my opinions as an opinionated person in a chair sometimes. But I will say, though, that if you want to give it a shot, as you already mentioned, as part of Steam Next Fest, there is a demo, and that demo was available as part of the Kickstarter as well. So with a playable demo, the option to give it a try, feel whether or not you think it's going to speak to you enough, these sorts of questions about having to rely on, the PR team or having to rely on renders and things like that are no longer a question anymore. It's entirely a question of, does it speak to you? And with a playable demo, enthusiastic as some of us may be about hack and slash action RPGs, or, if it's not your thing, easy way to tell. So I can confirm it does have that. The demo makes it better. And yeah. So, Mr. Nice Guy, I guess at the end of the day, I just have to ask, kick or kickstart?
It's hard because I'm super, super on the fence with this one. I will say one other positive is that it looks absolutely gorgeous, and they have a release date that isn't that far away. So it seems like maybe they are timing this so that, hey, let's have people play the demo, we can get some feedback, and then we can fix anything before Q3 when this comes out. I'm going to go with Kickstart on this one, even though I struggle with the price point.
Excellent. Yeah, and I too, I'm on the Kickstart train here. I think, the price point is a little bit high, but I can see what they're doing, and I think it shows good promise, and I think I'm willing to stake it. So Kickstart for me as well.
Nice. Love it. And please check out those indies on Steam Next Fest. Find yourself some fun stuff to add to your wish lists. It's one of the best times of year to be a gamer on Steam. Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's time for Nerd Flex. A segment where you, the viewers, try to stump the host. Sometimes you do. Most of the time, you don't. Now, Mac, it's been a while since we've done a sound test. Is it time for a sound test?
No, it was a sound test last episode, Mr. Nice Guy. You just missed it.
I just missed it. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, if you're here live, you have a job to do. Feel free to put some multiple choice questions in the chat, gaming related. Mac and I will use nothing but our noggins to try to answer them. And as sometimes people are shy, Mac, we have this trusty test bank of questions. And we're going to start there. Mac, this is a Sonic question. What is the name of the first zone in Sonic 4 Episode 1? I would need to lean on you for this.
Sonic 4 Episode 1. I mean, I want to say Green Hill Zone, but I really, really don't know.
Yeah, I think that might be from one of the earlier Sonics. Well, that's okay.
I know it's from the earlier Sonics, but I feel like it would be very much in keeping to do a redo. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay, let's go with it. Green Hill Zone. Final answer? It was the Splash Hill Zone.
Splash Hill. Okay, so, I mean, obviously I was wrong, but Hill Zone, 2 out of 3, that ain't bad.
That ain't bad at all.
I've got one that's actually been banked, sent in advance via Discord.
Oh, okay.
This comes from TQ Loudly, who asks, what is the name of the protagonist's mother in the video game Fable? This is the first one. Is it A, Briar Rose, B, Whisper, C, Page, or D, Scarlet Robe?
Interesting.
It has been a while since I've played Fable. I know that Briar Rose was a name, but I want to say I feel like that, like, wasn't it the sister who was named Briar Rose or something like that?
And I never completed Fable. I dabbled in Fable. It's Fable, so I feel like the name is going to be kind of unique. What were the two most unique names? I feel like it was on bookending the question. Maybe.
Yeah, I'd say Briar Rose and Scarlet Robe are the two more unique ones. B and C were Whisper and Page, and I feel like those, I don't know.
I feel like it'd be Scarlet something. I don't feel like Briar.
I'm torn between actually B and D, between Whisper and Scarlet Robe. And, but, you feel better about Scarlet Robe. Let's lock it in. Let's both go D, since that's our overlap.
Scarlet Robe it is.
Scarlet Robe. All right. And, Mr. Nice Guy, you are a genius.
We got
Scarlet Robe.
Logic.
Yes. Well,
Nice.
Sometimes. All right.
Sometimes.
What about this one in the chat, Mr. Nice Guy? Here live.
Yeah, here live from Ishmobile, he asks, in Dust and Neon, how many times would you have to reload, or rather, would you have to hit the reload button to reload a 6-shot revolver? A7, B2, C1, or D6?
Okay.
I think I know the answer, but what do you think, Max?
So, if I remember, you've got to press the reload button once to bring it up and to, eject whatever was out. And then you have to click in again for every single one. So I feel like of those answers, it's definitely not B, on a revolver, a 6-shot revolver. I think it's got to be A or D. Once again, we're narrowing down to A and D right out of the bat. I would say
so
A.
So here's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Your praise of Dust and Neon encouraged me to go back and play it a lot more over the past couple weeks. And wow, what a game. There's a setting you can change that makes it so that reloading is somewhat automatic if you just push the button. And in that instance, it would be one press to reload that 6-shot revolver. Knowing Ishmobile, I almost wonder if he is trying to trick us, because in that case, the answer would be both A and C.
No.
It could be 7, but if you go in and you change that setting, it could also be C.
Ishmobile is no Galvatron. Ishmobile is in it with us. Ishmobile, it's A. A's definitely the answer. He's not trying to trick us.
Okay, but I'm just saying it could also be C.
That is
because
fair.
you can go in and you could change that, but I believe A is the correct answer. Final answer, Ishmobile.
A final answer. The answer is A. If not cheating, it's 7. Open once to reload the animation, and one more time for each bullet being loaded. 1 + 2 + 2 + 1 + 1 = 7. A subtle nod to Clue there with the revolver. 1 + 2 + 2 + 1.
And I think that he's considering cheating being if you change that setting. But anyway, that has been... So we went 2 for 3 this week. That has been our Nerd Flex. Thank you so much, everybody.
All right. Well, now we turn to a little bit of legalese.
Legalese.
This is a little blast from the past. It's a tattoo episode, folks. So for a while now, we've had rulings one way and the other on a whole bunch of different artists' expressions as it relates to video games. We've seen dance moves, we've seen likenesses, and we've even seen tattoos. They've all taken their turns in the courts, and they've taken their turns here on this show. Well, this one, blast from the past, is a suit from the tattoo artist, Mr. James Hayden, who's done many tattoos for many famous NBA players. And you might be seeing where this is coming from. Players like LeBron James, Shaq, Danny Green, Mo Williams, and other NBA players, all of whom I can name because their names appear in the complaint. Also, Hayden's name is probably familiar because this is not his first rodeo against 2K games for the use of his tattoos without permission. Of special note is this lovely line that in this most recent suit he puts forward to jump that hurdle of proving someone had access to your copyrighted work, because that's one of the things you have to prove in a copying thing. You can't just have arrived at the same thing independently. You have to be able to show they had access. So here's the line. He says, quote, "Prior to the launch of the infringing game," which in this suit is 2K21, "defendants," that's 2K Games, "had been accused of infringing Hayden's work with respect to 6 previously launched basketball video games in the related case entitled Hayden v 2K Games. This case was pending when defendants launched the infringing game of 2K21. So it's just like, yeah, you guys were already on notice for years about this. So I have to prove they had access to my designs. They've been on notice. So at issue here in this most recent case is 6 different tattoos, some on LeBron, some on others, all of which are copyrighted works of art. They have been registered with the with the Copyright Office. They have unique numbers assigned to them. Hayden has never given permission, and they've never asked for permission, and they've been on notice about all of this. And, well, they've been on notice that at least he's not happy about it. So, so he filed this newest complaint, Mr. Nice Guy, for infringement, and requested that there be a jury trial to determine how much 2K Games owes him. But here's where it gets interesting, right? Because this past week, I've seen some reporting. Several outlets have said that there's been a ruling in some of the facts of this newest case. Most of them have said things to the effect of 4 of the 6 are being bounced on the suit because they were filed improperly with the Copyright Office. But it's one of those where I can't seem to find the actual document where it says any of that. I can't find the ruling. I can't find primary sources. All I can find is like a news source that credits another news source that in turn is crediting it. And whenever I see circular citations for facts, especially in a legal thing, I just get concerned that somebody got it wrong, because journalists don't tend to read court cases very well. There's a lot of that. And also these reports are kind of claiming that there is a jury trial coming out in April, and I don't know where they're getting this info from. But if it is, grab that popcorn bucket, because this is going to be interesting. There are very beautiful tattoos here in question, and it's really going to hinge on this sort of idea. Okay, you definitely used it. You photo reproduced this. You'd never had permission to put that ink on LeBron. I mean, obviously, LeBron James feels passionate about it. He's said that, those tattoos are part of who he is. We've talked about that in previous episodes, his opinions, as we've discussed these previous suits before. But it'll be interesting because, do they owe this tattoo artist anything? Do they owe future tattoo artists anything? And maybe all of this confusion can be just summed up by saying Hayden v 2K Games, there are multiple lawsuits, all with the same name. Is it entirely possible that people are getting confused? They're reporting it and it's getting reported in a bunch of things. Who knows?
It's so interesting, this world of tattoos and art and the intersection that it makes with video games. I mean, hypothetically, someone who gets a much more generic tattoo could be accused of plagiarism, right?
Yeah.
I mean, at what point? And then, if LeBron is on TV, it becomes, hey, I never said you could show my, art on TV. I'm exaggerating, but it's such a deep issue. And once it gets into the digital space of video games, it gets even more complicated. What's that, like, fair use terminology as well? Like, I feel like that could tie into this. Like, it's just so deep, and there's so many layers to this issue.
Well, Nice Guy, that's a pretty fantastic bit of, shall we say, issue spotting there. That is specifically one of the things cited by 2K Games as a reason why this should be, kicked out of the courts at least. They lost on this for summary judgment, but they did ask for it, that they were like, hey, this is fair use. Sure, the main component of the fair use idea is that it's a transformative thing. So maybe those, tattoos appear, but this isn't a game about tattoos. This is a completely new experience about, shooting baskets. And that's transformative here.
Right.
I'm sorry, I'm not a sports ball expert. Did I get the thing right?
You got it right. I could just sense the sarcasm and it made me smile.
Yeah. But yeah, no, it is interesting, and it is something that's worth addressing. It's interesting that tattoos is kind of how we're getting here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man, it's super interesting, and I'm really excited to see what happens because this translates to so many other things, and it'll be interesting to see what precedent is set.
It does. Well, obviously, that's not the law. It's just legalese, and thanks for listening to us go on about it.
Love it, love it, love it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to episode number 296 of Two Nerds in a Pod. So much fun recording this week. And before we go, we have one last segment called What We've Been Watching and What We've Been Playing, where we talk about just that, the cool nerdy stuff we've been into across all platforms, digital, physical, the cloud, everything. If you're here live, let us know what you're into the past week. Mac, what have you been playing and watching?
For playing, I've been playing some Anomaly Agent, frankly. Also, I did play another indie game as well that we're looking at highlighting in the future here. So I'll keep that. Now, I look forward to playing Metroid Prime Trilogy on the Wii.
Nice.
However, as I have been away from home this week, I haven't been able to actually play it yet, but I'm working toward it.
Where'd you pick that up out of curiosity? Like a retro game store,
just
GameStop?
on eBay.
On eBay, nice.
Yeah, so I saw one that's just like, add to cart. But that's most of what about you, Mr. Nice Guy?
Dude, so on the cruise, I was not playing video games all day, but I did have some downtime, right? My wife falls asleep earlier than I do, and so I'd go out, I'd see a comedy show, and then maybe I'd come back and get a little gaming in. So obviously we're playing some stuff. We've reached that point, Mac, where we're playing stuff that we can't talk about now, right? We're the cool kids. We're playing games that we can't discuss because they're under embargo. But as far as stuff I can discuss, been playing a lot of Dust and Neon. Obviously, I did play Anomaly Agent. I did just pick up yesterday Modern Warfare 3, almost strictly for the zombies, because I love zombies. And, baller on a budget. I didn't buy the game until it was on sale. I was like, 30% off. I'm finally about to buy this. So picked that up yesterday. Doing a lot of other retro stuff. I got some good Miss Pac-Man in on my Steam Deck while I was on the cruise. And Max, some of the other stuff that I've been playing, I just don't want to talk about yet because it's not redacted. It's not that we can't talk about it. It's just stuff that we're going to be reviewing in the coming weeks.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to really get into that, but lots of good indies, and we have a huge backlog of stuff to share with y'all. And tell you about which ones are worth your time. So as far as watching, just a couple movies. The Flash. Have you seen The Flash? I hadn't seen it yet.
I just did. The one that featured Michael Keaton?
Yeah, that was a great movie. I thought it was great. I don't know why people hate DC.
I mean, I thought some of it was great. Some of it wasn't great. But I still enjoyed it for what it was.
They could have trimmed the fat. Some of the dialogue between the two protagonists was just cheesy and could have been cut. Yeah. But enjoyed that. And then watching some NFL football and NBA basketball. Mac, what are people into in the chat?
Well, let's see. We've got Spennis the Menace. He's been watching Big Bang Theory, The Floor, The Traitors, and Hell's Kitchen. We've got Ishmael not really watching much this week. As for playing, Spennis says Pal World. Not surprised.
Ooh.
Tekken 8, Go Mecha Ball, and Super Mario Wonder. And same with the Misses has been joining him on that. Ishmael has been playing Project Zomboid, Simu Trans, Transport Fever 2, and Pistol Whip. Man, what a full body workout Pistol Whip is. And very fun. Dust and Neon as VR. That's sort of Pistol Whip. Very fun.
Right? That's a really good analogy. Now, Ishmobile picked up Dust and Neon. Didn't you recommend that when it was like $5, Mac?
I
End of
did.
the year indie game?
Yeah, we
what
did.
A deal. What a deal. Mm-hmm. For 5 bones?
Yeah.
My goodness. It always, I got to say this, it always gets me excited when I see Ishmobile or someone playing a game like Project Zomboid. Because I'm like, man, that's in my backlog. I really got to put more time in that. That and like Deep Rock Galactic and just like all these dope games in my Steam library. Mac, you have got to get you some good internet so we can squad up.
I do. I'm working on it.
I got Valheim in my backlog and I haven't touched it. I just want a group of people to play it with me. I have friends, but no one plays it. So anyway, video games are awesome. Mac, why don't you take us home, sir?
All right. Thanks, everybody, for coming out and being part of the show, making episode 296 what it was. Remember, you can show up for the live show, twitch.tv/2nerdsinapod. That's with the number 2, of course, on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Central is when we get it started. But either way, to all of our people who are here with us live right now, you're awesome. And to everybody who's listening to this after the fact, you are also awesome. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being there. Thank you for just being everywhere. Be excellent to each other and keep it nerdy.
Deuces. Love
Bye.
y'all. Bye.